And can you just give me a quick summary of your background?
Yeah, I spent 25 years in law enforcement in South Florida, including some stints on rapid response teams in South Florida, but most of my time was assigned to school safety divisions, both in Broward County, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and in Palm Beach County. And then when I left there, I headed up the National Association of School Resource Officers. I served as their executive director for 6 years before launching the School Safety Advocacy Council. So, been to the White House on several of these incidents that have occurred after a school shooting, looking at ways to how we in law enforcement can better our response with the ultimate goal of saving lives. And I have to tell you, not only watching the response or lack thereof in the Texas school shooting, but it's probably got to be one of the most disturbing things I've seen in my 25 years of doing school safety. And I'm part of this law enforcement family, so I'm being critical on my own family, but this response was pathetic. You don't have kids in there for that long when you know they're being killed, shot, and hurt, and it's just there's no rhyme or reason. And watching it makes it even more disturbing from my aspect through law enforcement eyes.
I was going to say how you said since Columbine training's changed, a lot has evolved, and you said one of the biggest things is kind of getting to the shooter as quickly as possible.
Right, and making sure we have the right equipment to go in. We're not asking any one officer to be a hero and walk into a suicide situation, but from the videos and what's coming out, they had the equipment, they had the firepower, and more importantly, there was a lot of focus on breaching the door into the classroom. Well, these classrooms had windows as well. I don't care if you have to drive a police vehicle through that door. You get in there and you save lives. It's just incredibly difficult to watch, and it's probably I've gone as far as calling it disgusting.
I was going to say, just with your background and you see that happen, like you said, shocking, and to you, disgusting. There were a lot of officers there by the end of the video who had not gone down there. Generally, at least a couple people go down there? In the beginning, they did have a few officers go down who got shot at, and then they came back and stayed back.
Right. They had ballistic shields as well, which would have provided a great portion of protection. But you got to engage the shooter. If for nothing else, he's engaging you and not engaging kids and killing kids. We saw a incident that was horrific in itself in Parkland, Florida, here where I'm at in Florida, and where an officer failed to go in, and that officer right now is facing criminal charges here in our state. So this is probably 10 times worse than what I saw in Parkland. I can understand the parents there and nationally. Our office has received hundreds of calls from parents. I can understand their frustration and sadness in not seeing this. And law enforcement really needs to step up to the plate here and make sure that this is something that's never repeated.
Yeah, so that's the part when they first got there and they did send people down quite quickly, and then they almost got shot at, and then they come back. And then after they come back to this spot, they don't go down the hallway again for at least another 45 minutes. What generally do you, if that happens and they go take cover, what are you supposed to do after that?
Well, what you're looking at here is exactly what came out of Columbine. Is no longer are we going to sit back and wait for SWAT teams or response teams when you have 2 or 3 officers that are trained. And my understanding is they did have active shooter training there. This looks like a very typical active shooter response and going down there. Now, hearing the shots doesn't necessarily mean you run and take cover, because those shots are indicative of kids being killed. And so you're already in the position. Are you're gonna certainly put yourself in harm's way in some respect when you go into that classroom or you breach that classroom. But at that point, you've got to breach. You're there, and take the gunfight away from the kids. And I'd rather take the shots at me than have the kids getting killed. This is a pretty typical response, but the retreat part is not. Also, additionally, you see the officers running away from the scene. And yeah, one officer has a vest, and I'm assuming that perhaps the other officer in uniform has a vest on underneath that as well. But when you're running from the event, you've turned your back to the shooter now. So you've probably put yourself more in harm's way running away from a shooter who could have easily stepped in the hall and taken headshots at you on your way back out. So you're probably safer at this point to engage the shooter head on than you would be running with your back to the shooter.
So this is basically, if you look at the timestamp, it goes from 11:38 to now we're all the way to about 12:20 when they did go in there. So when you see how long they were back there, like you said, that's not normal for them to be all at the end of a hallway for that long.
No, this is a complete waste of time right now. Like I said, I've done several interviews on this very matter, and there were a couple of news outlets that were saying that there was discussion of being able to breach this particular type of door, and that it opened, outward instead of inward, but any excuse. Like I said, I've looked at the dynamics of this particular classroom, and you have two classrooms that were breached here in this particular area, both of which had windows. I didn't see any response outside the windows of these classrooms. I mean, even if you had to use smoke grenades or some other strategic way to get in there and take the fight away from students who are being killed, you do it. And simply, it's like I said, very disturbing to watch. Even for me in law enforcement, we go into gun battles where we know there is one person that may hurt one person. This is a gun battle where there's a one person that is hurting 20 some odd people and taking their lives. And so there's just no way to make sense of the response here. And I can certainly understand the frustration of these parents and the community.
I was going to say, I have a hard time watching it. So do you, knowing, there's
absolutely
almost 20 kids in there.
It's my own profession, and it's sometimes very hard to say, but it's something that needs to be said, and it's something that needs to be fixed, because we cannot continue in this profession to have a response, or like I said, lack thereof, like that ever.
Do you think there'll be any change that comes from this, or maybe just more emphasis on what's supposed to be done?
I think there's change from every incident that happens. I really do. It's probably easier to sit back when you're looking at a situation like Parkland, and certainly you don't have any excuse. But when you're talking about one officer failing to go in, we see battle fatigue with our soldiers, and a physiological freeze up, a mental freeze up with officers who are in the battlefield and soldiers. And I certainly don't know that's the case in Parkland or any of this. But when you have that many officers there, and maybe there was some inappropriate or absolutely wrong direction by whoever the incident commander was, and I know there's some question as to who the incident commander was, but you don't need an incident commander to know what to do and know what is right here. It's very, very simple. You've got to eliminate the shooter. Time is not on your side. You've got to go in there and you've got to eliminate that threat immediately. And that's the only response.
Is there anything else you want to add on this topic?
I think, like I said, we learn a lot from looking back at incidents, whether it's Columbine, Paducah, Sandy Hook, every one of those tragedies, law enforcement and the education family, we learn and we try to safeguard as much as we can. There's no perfect world out there, but the response to active shooters is something that, you know, we know now. We didn't have to, it's not something we should be learning after that incident. It's something we knew before this, and it just, protocol wasn't followed.
And I guess lastly, you had mentioned that the Parkland, the officer who was there, was facing charges. Do you think that's a possibility in Uvalde?
I don't profess to know what Texas law holds.
Mhm.
You know, certainly I would imagine it's something that officials there are going to look into,
Mhm.
or whether it's the commander of the incident or officers whole scale. And I'm not even saying I'm a proponent of that right now. I'm saying that something went terribly wrong there. The response it was not an effective one, obviously, and it cost a lot of kids their lives. And as probably, I'm probably more sad. I'm saddened as a law enforcement officer for 25 years, but I'm probably more sad as a parent of two children. I can't imagine being a parent sitting outside and being told we're waiting to go in. And now these parents watching this video, it's heart-wrenching.